Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have in the studio Will Winzor-Saile. Will, how are you doing?
Good to be here.
Listen, absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. You've been someone who I've watched on many a stage over the years. You have been getting awards and plaudits left, right, and centre, richly deserved as well. So I'm thrilled to have you in here now and talking about everything you've been doing at Redburn, a business I've known for a long, long time. Who've done some amazing, groundbreaking things. Technology is very much at the heart of it. You're very much at the heart of that. So thanks for coming in, first and foremost.
Thank you very much for having me. Been a fan for a long time, and you said some very kind words. So yeah, always happy to help.
Very good, very good. So look, lots to delve into today. I think you've always had a good insight into what's happening technologically out in the marketplace. You guys have been doing. I think you call it punching above your weight and at various different stages. And there's loads of there's a strategy behind that I think you bring to life really, really well. So we're going to dive into all of that. But before we do, just tell us a little bit about Redburn. Tell us about yourself, your background, and where we are today.
Yeah, so my background's in tech. So I spent several years at Fidessa and sort of slowly worked my way up from low-level implementation up to marketing and sort of product level. Then I moved over to join Redburn. Mm-hmm. Redburn's been going for about 25 years now. And we started out as a very traditional kind of research-driven fundamental analysis shop. Execution's an important way of bringing commission to support that business. Mm-hmm. With MiFID II, it then became important that actually execution had to stand on its own feet and trade in its own right. By the time that came along, we'd already got a good execution offering, but really needed to be able to demonstrate how good that can be. So that's what really kind of brought us to focusing on the areas that we can do well. Yeah. And the one area that jumped out for us was liquidity access. It was something that we'd always kind of dipped a toe in the water and done fairly well, but we realised we could actually differentiate ourselves and kind of bring that out in a way that other people couldn't. So we launched the Navigator product, which was one of the first sort of dark seeking strategies on the street. And I think that kind of focus on liquidity, the approach to it, and the kind of looking for innovation outside of just core dev work is something that's been really important to us.
Yeah, I think that's very much what you're known for. That sort of a combination of focus into specific areas, and I think sometimes people try and be too much in too many areas at that sort of stage. But there's a focus within that, and then also without question, it goes back a long time. That focus on innovation and how can we do things and think about things in a different way to get better results. And I guess that's kind of when you look at things how in a sector that's pretty much dominated by bigger players, the Bulge brackets, etc. There's an opportunity to compete. There's an opportunity to go head to head, but it requires that innovation. It requires that different thought and that nimbleness, right?
Yeah, that we're not an investment bank.
Yeah.
So we do not have hundreds of dev people. We don't have the scale to just throw technology and money at something. But that doesn't mean we can't innovate.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to focus on where you can actually add value, to sort of work out what is most useful for you. So yeah, we are not a technology firm. I have no interest in managing data centers, in managing market gateways. That's not something that's particularly differentiated, at least not for the kind of strategies that we do. So partly it is focusing your tech spend where it's important, and I think the kind of classic build versus buy debate is very important there. And it's also about just at a business level knowing what you do.
Yeah.
So we are proudly an agency shop. Our focus is on developing stuff that will help our clients, not on maintaining our own liquidity, running our own books, quoting or anything like that. We get an order. Everything we do is to make sure that order executes in the best possible way. And that allows us to really focus what we do and provide innovation where others perhaps have conflicting interests or other focus that just prevents them from being able to add that value.
You mentioned buy and build there, and I've seen you on numerous different panels this year talking about that. I know you were with Steve Grob, who's been on the show, Rena, who's been on the show, Mike Powell, who's been on the show, John Butler, who's been on the show. So all of these people preceding it. But it's a conversation that's been very, very prevalent over the course of the last 2 years. I know there's a whole day's conference now focused on buy and build. Or buy or build, or buy and build, whichever way you want to sort of term the whole thing put together. There's some really interesting opportunities that come into there as well. You come from, as you mentioned before, a sort of fairly enterprise background over at Fidessa in the software side, and we've seen this sort of real interest. I mentioned some of the companies there before that are around it. There's this ability to patch in a number of different innovative, forward-thinking businesses, and I think you've always been very much in that sort of mindset, haven't you? How can you embrace that technology and bring it into it alongside of the innovation that you're doing internally? Give me your, you've been on these things. Give us the snapshot of what your table thumping sort of moment's been around buy and build.
So for me, my background, I was a business analyst, and the one thing you always ask is, what's the actual requirement? And my traders hate it because they will ask for something very specific and you go, no, you don't want an Excel sheet. You are trying to achieve something. Let me know what it is, and we will figure out the best way to do that. Yeah. And I think that's essential to the way you build the business, the way you build the technology.
Comes back to the Henry Ford faster horses quotes, doesn't it? About if they're giving the people what they wanted, they said faster horses and all that sort of thing.
Exactly, spot on.
Yeah.
So it is sort of having that vision of, this is where we want to go, this is where we can add value.
Yeah.
And it's sort of then just working backwards from there. So there are 500 vendors out there, and we could start to build something in-house. And as I mentioned, market gateways, data centers, a lot of this is largely commoditized. We have no need to build that out. If we were going for ultra low latency, maybe we would, and we'd sort of commoditize elsewhere. But for us, it's being able to sort of adjust what we do in real time, and it's been more about agility around the platform than being able to sort of code huge monolithic things. So for me, the important thing is working with best of breed vendors. So we will use the best OMS we can. If parts of that aren't perfect, we will go and find someone who does it better, and we will join them together. And I think being able to do that requires a level of architecture that, again, needs a lot of thought. You can't just go out and buy something off the peg and expect it to do something different or something that no one else can do. But actually, if you can buy 2 or 3 different things, join them together with the right kind of glue in between them, you can actually get them working in ways that perhaps no one else does. And having that control and that architecture really allows you to innovate at a speed that other people can't, because not only can you sort of make them do what you need them to do, but you're also not worried about the underlying code, the underlying maintenance, that we have people providing solutions, maintaining those solutions. We have the people that build them, hosting them. We are interested in the bit in the middle, which is where we can actually add value and where we can innovate. And I think it's that build or buy as much as you can, and then build the bits that stick them together and anything which is not available off the shelf.
Yeah. I think that's so important, isn't it? And it's really interesting because you mentioned there that we'll get best of breed in those sort of spaces, and you also talked there about the implications of going up against the bulge bracket businesses, whilst being a smaller entity within that sort of space. So you can hoover up the sort of things, but it's got to be the right sort of price at the right sort of time to get the best of breed at the same sort of stage as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do you go about you mentioned 500, and it's at least 500, right? In the spaces, there's new companies that pop up all the time. There's Emperor's new clothes all the time in terms of what we're going to do. We're going to come on to some of those technologies in a minute, where it seems like another company's popping up every 2 seconds. And particularly if you look at 21, 22 and the investment that's going into it, and how many companies sort of flooded into the marketplace with big sales teams that were pushing their products on you left, right and centre. I imagine that's quite a difficult thing to actually ascertain what the best of breed looks like within that sort of space. So if you're looking at these companies and you're thinking that's where we're going to buy in the specialisation, and you've got a number of different, how do they stand out? How do you make that decision? Because that's an important decision to make, right?
It is a really important decision, and it's not one you always get right.
Yeah.
We have definitely onboarded vendors that, in hindsight, I wish we hadn't.
Yeah.
Partly that is making sure that you have the right focus to be able to understand what they do, how they work, and having that sort of combination of a business and a technology background, so you can kind of look at them and really understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the big advantages of my Fidessa days is I know a lot of salespeople, and salespeople love floating from company to company to company.
Yeah.
So there's probably a group of about 10 people out there that every couple of years will just phone me up and be, Will, can we have a pint? I want to update you. I've just landed at a new company.
The next best thing.
I don't necessarily know what they do, but you know, can you have a look? Can you kick the tires and can you let me know?
Yeah.
And that sort of thing is really important. That it means I can
for them and you.
For both of us.
Yeah.
And you know, you had James Harrison on the other day.
Yeah.
That's exactly how that intro was done.
Yeah.
It was a salesperson I'd worked with before said, I've landed here, I don't really understand it, can you come in and have a look?
Yeah.
And that allows me to keep up to speed with all of the vendors out there, ideally get a kind of early look and see where they are, and just have a sort of very friendly, open conversation. That, yeah, what you don't want is someone to come in, sell you a solution, pure sales pitch. You never quite trust it. You never know what's there behind the scenes. I'd always much rather have a sort of that open and honest conversation of what do you actually do? How does that work? And having people who understand where they're trying to get the business, but also have enough technical knowledge to actually drill in and go, well, when you say that, what does that mean? How do you do that? And not catch people out, but just get a deep enough understanding that you can then say, oh, actually, I know exactly where I can use that. That will fit in over here. Yeah, let's look into this in a bit more detail.
James, on the episode I recorded with him, talked about you being an important part of the Genesis story, the genesis of Genesis, as we spoke about it, and you were an early adopter there. I think being an early adopter has and we when we were launching the business, we were always very keen to bring in RecTech as a recruitment business. That sort of gave us that competitive advantage. When you talk about taking on the Bulge brackets, you've got to have that competitive advantage. Early adoption must be part of the strategy with it as well. Let's take Genesis as an example. Let's take other things. What gives you the confidence to say, right, we're going to go in with that business at that sort of stage and bring in that tech when it might not necessarily be, fully evolved, et cetera, et cetera. I think you've got massive advantages to that, as well as some threats. I think if you look at vendors, one of the biggest issues they've got to scale is having to go through procurement processes that make it particularly difficult. So having companies in there that can navigate that a little bit and bring fresh ideas into it can make them incredibly important. That means you can have a influence on the flow of their products and how it develops as well, a little bit more from there, so you can tailor it to you and your experience. You've got that ability to influence the product as it goes through as well. Are these all things that came into your mind as well? Is it universal, or what prompted what prompts you to make that call with an early stage business?
So I think the early stage businesses, as you say, you get a deep understanding. You potentially get a lot more for your money, and you get that ability to help shape the product. Yeah. So we looked at what James and what Genesis had, and said, you're building products on this. Actually, I've got 5 or 6 products that we're trying to build. We're using different frameworks. They're kind of a bit scattered. If we had that kind of framework, I could consolidate all of that. Yeah. And in an ideal situation for me, I can look at something like that and say, well, actually, we're going to save this cost here. We can allocate that there, and it becomes a very easy commercial decision. I think where you need to sort of take a bit more of a punt and sort of, well, actually, we are going to trust these people. We are going to make a commercial investment. That just needs a heavy due diligence and a lot of trust. As I say, sometimes you do get it wrong. Yeah. But it is, do I trust the people that are there? Does the technology actually stack up? Yeah. And ideally, let's actually have a look at it. Let's get it in a UAT environment. Let's test it. Let's make sure it works before we make that commitment. Yeah. And I think that's also one of the advantages of being a kind of proudly tier 2 firm. We don't have the long, protracted procurement process that a smaller firm does. Yeah. Or a larger firm does, sorry. So if we see something that looks good, we can say, well, look, it's a relatively small investment. Let's try it. If it doesn't work in a year, we'll get rid of it. And I think this is, for me, why it's important for the larger firms to have those kind of innovation funds or teams who look at this kind of stuff. That there's so much out there, and innovation is essential to the industry continuing to grow. And these procurement processes and everything else make it very difficult. Yeah. They're they're there for very good reasons, that we need cybersecurity, we need to not be funneling sort of money into something that's going to fail.
Yeah, yeah.
But we also need to find a way to invest in firms that are innovating and kind of reward them for that innovation.
Yeah.
And that's something we will always try and do. That it helps us grow and it helps them grow. And
it's a good marriage, isn't it?
The best vendor relationships we have are symbiotic.
Yeah.
That we can feed into their product, help them develop. And, where we've got a good relationship with vendors, we will spend a lot of time talking about our requirements, where we need to go, what we need them to do, kind of just helping their product teams to develop. And equally, they will deliver us quality code, help us understand the business better. And it's that kind of relationship which really grows the business and
proper partnership
and helps
on both sides, isn't it?
So it is those kind of true partnership vendors are difficult to find.
Yeah.
But when you do find them, can just make life so much easier for everyone.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting when you look at that you've often sort of seen these businesses that see these shiny new things tech-wise and invest in a whole patchwork of different things. And it becomes a sort of Frankenstein's monster of buy and build technology, where everything should have its place and everything on paper should be there, but the marriage of all of them makes it a pretty ugly sort of scenario. I think there's a one of my favourite things over the last 10 years is seeing a lot more. The word we'll come on to in a bit is interoperability, right? But the ability for companies there to interoperate with each other has become a lot more prevalent than when you had these sort of different things, or even worse, a few years ago, where you talked about enterprise technology covering up everything and saying you can't. This is the way it has to be. Right now, it feels a lot more personalised. It feels a lot more digital. It feels a lot more like the experience you get on your phone or what have you. That allows it to be a much easier process.
It's getting there.
Yeah.
I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
One of the downsides of that sort of best of breed is you've got a lot of vendors.
Yeah.
That not only means a slightly messy architecture, it means you want to get something done, you potentially need 2 or 3 of them to coordinate. And I think one of the kind of biggest developments in that space, and one of the most important, is the kind of slightly more collegiate, slightly more open stance that a lot of the vendors are taking.
Yeah.
That even the kind of big monolithic legacy vendors are now opening up. They are giving you APIs, they are giving you ways that you can interact and kind of break that up, because they realise that they can't deliver everything. And if you can't deliver everything, you either get pushed to one side or you sort of sit in the middle and allow people to augment around the outside. And I think with these innovations, that's again the importance of somebody that understands the kind of core architecture.
Yeah.
That one of my concerns with the kind of no-code, low-code, we keep hearing somebody can replace a spreadsheet with an enterprise application in an hour. That's fantastic. I do not need 30 enterprise applications all working slightly differently, all scattered around the business.
Yeah.
So I think you still need that level of architecture of business analysis to kind of look at it and say, is this sensible? Does that work? And to make sure that where you're adding these, they are adding value and not just making life more difficult for yourself. And part of that architecture is that interoperability that you talk about.
Yeah. And you treat architecture slightly differently in your firm, right? The whole setup of IT as a service within the business.
So my team, one of my teams is what we call the execution architecture team.
Yeah.
So that is distinctly separate from IT, and it's separate from the trading business.
Yeah.
Now we do a bit of sort of trade support and stuff like that, but our core thing is delivering trading platforms, delivering tools, delivering integration and everything to the desk. That means that we are able to focus entirely on what gives the best outcome for the traders and therefore for the clients. So I'm not worried that, we've got a big Microsoft license because of Windows, therefore Power BI is slightly better for this. It is, no, this is a dedicated provider, they make sense for this part of the business. And again, one of the things you often lose in a larger firm is the kind of business understanding behind the tech.
Yeah.
That it is, I'm delivering Word, I'm delivering an RMS. Those are very different requirements, different levels of complexity. So I think having that kind of dedicated team is very important. And
probably another string in the bow to how you compete, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without that, you don't have somebody with that kind of overarching view of this is how all of these vendors should fit together. This is best of breed. You tend to end up with look, it's easier if we just buy from the same company. They've got something which kind of does the job. Let's just use that.
Yeah.
And
Settling.
That potentially works for, yes, we might as well use Outlook because it comes with Windows. It's good enough for email. We don't need to differentiate in that space. Something as core as an OMS, we absolutely do need to differentiate. We need to know that it is bulletproof. We need to know that we can add to it and develop it and make changes as quickly as our clients need us to. Yeah,
no, I absolutely agree. I'm thinking from a vendor sort of standpoint here, and I spend a lot of my time speaking to vendors and dealing with everyone from the technologists through to the C-suite, through to the sales teams. And if I'm to sort of summarise some of the areas where they pitch themselves, that could be cost reduction, that could be removing friction, that could be user experience, that could be speed, all of those sort of areas. I think or increasing productivity, and I think as I say quite a lot on this show, I think in a world where it is becoming more and more difficult to maintain margin in any business, full stop. There's only so much cost reduction which you can do. Cost reduction is another one of those things which people are selling. We've got a system here that can take your costs away from here, or people, or whatever it might be. There's only so much cost reduction you can do in a business to maintain margin around where you go. The big thing for me, this isn't a leading point around it, but I think the only way forward for business full stop is to say, right, we are, and everyone talks about a global productivity crisis, but there's a lot of headroom in terms of productivity and how we can move people further forward. And I wonder, when you're assessing vendors, whether you look at it and you say, right, and maybe it's different for each different part of it, but would you rank cost reduction, friction removal, productivity, all of these different things in different sort of elements? What's most important to you?
I think the productivity element is ultimately key. That what we need to do is deliver products, deliver usability. Now, if we can make that easier, then that is reducing friction. Fantastic. If we can do it cheaper, it's a no-brainer. But I think ultimately what we want is functionality, and we want flexibility, and we want that kind of agility to change what we do as needed and to be able to sort of adjust to client needs. The difficulty with that is that's a much harder sell upstream than cost reduction. That if I go to sort of our board and say, look, if we take this, I can turn that off and we will save 10 grand a year, I will get, of course, go on with it. If I say that if we get this, we can develop 20% faster and therefore deliver an extra 3 applications a year, you get a lot of, well, what's that worth? Like, is it actually saving that many man days? And I think that's always the challenge for any sort of tech vendor, is no one's got an infinite pot of money. That you're always competing with budgeting and everything else, and we want innovation, we like innovation, and I will do everything I can to sort of invest in areas that I think are going to allow us to innovate. And most of the time that's through our vendors innovating.
And encouraging them, and you work very closely with your vendors to help them innovate as well, right?
Absolutely. So, one of the areas we will try and help is, you can't always push the cost up, but you can help them develop what they're working on. You can sort of share business ideas, and you can try and get the most out of what you've got, which feeds into that sort of efficiency point that we've got a lot of vendors, we've got a lot of architecture. There is plenty of scope to expand that and do more with it. Sometimes that needs investment, sometimes it just needs money, sometimes it needs more tech. A lot of the time it just needs the right people. And one of the things, again, we find allows us to perhaps punch above our weight, as you said earlier, is getting the right people in front of the right technology. And that's not just tech venues, even venues, brokers. The amount of progress you can make by just having a conversation with them and just saying, look, we send you this type of order flow. If we were to only send you the end of the order, if we were to send slightly larger size, would you be able to give us a better price? Would you be able to show us more liquidity? And that's something that, you're never going to do through sheer technology. You can throw as many devs as you like at it. None of them are going to have a conversation with a market maker and say, look, can you just show us more flow?
Yeah.
So I think it's really finding the right people and technology and getting them to work well together is always the biggest challenge.
Do you know what I've said, and I think this is so important. I'm pleased you went down that sort of route as well, because I've mentioned before that you're the third episode we filmed today, and I love it. You know, it's genuine, and I've learned loads from each one of them. But there's been a core theme through all of them. If I break it down to people, which is very much close to my heart. And I think that sort of ability to win the hearts and minds and to put all these things in play and have the right team to be able to deliver these things is incredibly important. No matter how great the product is, no matter how great the business is, if you haven't got the right people behind those two things, you're in the wrong sort of spot. You're fighting against it.
Yeah, but 100% that the people make all the difference.
Yeah.
That everything from the vendor level, knowing there is somebody at a vendor that there are always going to be problems day to day.
Yeah.
But if I've got someone I can phone up and say, look, this has gone too far, can you step in and help us out?
Yeah.
Knowing there's somebody there, got a good relationship, means we can trust that vendor a lot more.
Yeah.
People on our side, we need to understand the business, understand the technology, and are gluing things sensibly and not just making this huge spider web that we can't manage. Down to our traders need to appreciate the importance of that technology and how they can use it and how they can leverage it to help the clients.
Yeah.
So there's no point delivering that tech if it doesn't get on the client's desktop.
Yeah.
And that is very much a human interaction.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking, and I'm looking back to the tech that we've invested in all the way through, and look, that's always designed about increasing productivity of the team. How do we make it as easy as possible for them to do their job? And I think sometimes about the teams that have come in and sold. So we've done exactly the same thing. We've had partnerships that have been ever since day one, 14 years ago when we first started the business, that have been absolutely golden. And certain ones where we brought in the wrong technology, which looked fantastic, but basically it was a sales team that came in, sell the world to you and then disappear afterwards. And that customer success, the bits afterwards of making sure you manage the relationship afterwards to get the best out of the product, I think that's such a missing ingredient into vendor, the tech vendor.
And it sort of just permeates the culture of the company.
Yeah. Get that right, and you're golden.
You get salespeople who are sort of incentivized for long-term relationships. They want to grow it. They want to work with you. You end up just getting a lot more growth. And one of the things we see with sort of some sort of smaller vendors is they will get in a focused sales team who will go who will sell you the moon. Yeah. And hopefully you just look at them and go, no, that's just not happening. Yeah. Worst case, you believe them, and 6 months later you say, well, this is clearly just not true. Yeah. And
it sneaks over the line.
It takes
sometimes.
a long time to recover from that kind of thing. Yeah. And I've had vendors like that myself. Yeah. I've also seen them at other places where people have sort of said, we've onboarded these people and we don't really like it. And you say, I'm not surprised. Yeah. I've met their salespeople. Yeah. And it is that culture of, look, we're all trying to innovate, we're all trying to work together. Let's make sure we've got the right people and the right tech to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about right tech and sort of move on to that. So we're filming this at the last week before Christmas, 24. 25, I think, has got some really interesting themes technologically to look at. So I think there's going to be some, there's some great opportunity, I think, out there across the next sort of year. Most of it is around areas there that have been spoken about a lot. I don't think there's anything really genuinely breakthrough this year that's coming down the pipe that's going to change the world. But we've got 3 or 4 things all happening at the same time anyway that have been generational. Even if you want to throw cloud into that whole piece, we're still in that, which is still an evolving play. We're at this generational movement of loads of different things happening at the same sort of stage. So I know that we've spoken about interoperability, we've spoken about no code, low code. Those are 2 areas there which I know you're sort of backing and interested in over the course of the next year. And of course, I think this is probably the record for 2024 and how long it's gone until we've actually said the words AI or letters AI in a conversation. Those are all areas which are going. So throwing those all into a pot, what does it mean? What's it look like? What are you seeing in tech for 2025?
So I think going back, you mentioned sort of cloud. Yeah. And I think cloud is almost genesis for a lot of this stuff. That the interoperability, both front end and more importantly back end, which tends to get forgotten about, only works because people are willing to kind of open up and offer their APIs. Most of them are only doing that because of the ease of cloud access and everything that helps them support that. And it just lowers the cost of entry to new vendors, which means kind of you're forced to interoperate. And I think the same with low code. You know, these technologies mean you can spin up a server in 5 minutes rather than calling your procurement team, waiting them to deliver a rack, waiting for it to get set up. And that allows low code, no code to say, well, look, we're going to give you dedicated hardware, we're going to give you everything else, build whatever you want, and it will just work. And I think they've really just come out of that lower level kind of tech innovations have grown and have allowed them to become so important. And yeah, though they very much moved on from fairly ethereal ideas of, you know, yes, we should do something around interoperating, to 2 or 3 companies in each space really pushing forward and saying this is the way it should work, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think over the next year they are going to dominate, and it's going to get to the point where everybody has a bit of it somewhere. I think AI is earlier in that process.
We were saying before we came on, it feels like it's another, there'll be lots of new cases around it, no real identification of what it actually is, but probably another year or 2 until it's really mass adopted and ready actually to be at that stage as well in this sector.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the best sort of analogy I've been given is the .com bubble. That everybody, we've got a website, we are now on the web.
Yeah.
Having a website doesn't make you a electronic business any more than having a .ai domain makes you an AI company. And sort of so many people at the moment are taking ChatGPT, training it on a particular set of data, and then claiming that is amazing innovation and they're doing something no one else is doing. And I think for me that generative AI and everything that goes with it is the equivalent of that cloud, those REST APIs, everything that's kind of made this possible. And now it's available to everyone. This is where we see a lot of innovation, and as you say, hopefully over the next year or 2, we will see a few big players come out, your equivalent of your Amazons, your Googles, say, no, this is how it should be done. This is what we're doing differently. I mean, it may well end up being Amazon and Google. I think smart money may well be there. I think there will be those smaller companies who get it and find exactly what they want to do with it.
Well, that's the trading advantage as far as I'm concerned with it, isn't it? It's like, who's got that piece where you can really utilise it and get the use cases. And we talked about the conference scene earlier on, right? There's every single year that you do it, there's a couple of advances on it all. I interviewed the panel for Fix Americas 2 years in a row on AI, and if you look at 2023, there was a huge amount of excitement on it. I spoke to the same people in 24 and they were saying, I feel like we should have more things to say. And they hadn't quite got to that sort of phase. And then you speak to certain companies. I was on stage at FinTech Connect with Ben Wren of SigTech. And again, this is now where you're starting to see real use case coming into it in capital markets. And I think that's quite an exciting sort of phase for it to be in.
And I think for a firm like us, it's a very difficult sort of line to tread. That we've built up our name over the last 25 years as a premium provider of research and premium provider of execution. We've got a senior team, I'm not allowed to call them old. We've got experienced people delivering quality human content. The last thing we want to do is water that down and say, we're just going to use an AI summary. The trader's going to send out just a quick paragraph at the start of every day.
But I'm not sure that's where the real advantage is, isn't it? To me, it's about taking out some of the heavy lifting of that and giving them better information quicker, so then they can do the human bits as well. So when you've got an experienced team who are able to get better, quicker information to it, that becomes a massive advantage for you if you can get that bit right. Rather than saying this is the lazy aspect of what you were talking about there.
And again, we talked about sort of the importance of having the right people in the middle. That you can give an AI summary of a research piece to a trader, they can understand that, they can appreciate, okay, that does make sense, I'm going to push that forward, and that saved them half an hour of going through the bit of research. That is very different to, well, I'm just going to copy and paste that into the chat. And I think it's making sure you've got the right people who understand why it can be used, how it can be used. And the same goes for the algos.
Yeah.
That again, you don't want to just stick AI on an algo and hope for the best. You want to understand how it works, understand where it's going to add value, and then work it in a way which augments and improves the current workflow, not waters it down or just automates it for the sake of automating it.
Yeah. I mean, I could be talking about this for a long time, and I always say this show goes incredibly quickly when you're in the thick of it all. So let's try and tie this all together and what it means for you and Redburn. So we know there's big tech innovation. You talked about a lot of the things that you're doing to compete and doing all that. Tell me what's happening with the business. New products, more awards, I'm sure, throughout the course of the year. It's a benchmark, I think, for a real innovative mindset within technology within this sort of space, and I've got huge admiration for what you and the team have always been able to do. So tell us what it looks like in 2025, what's coming up, what's exciting for you and the team.
So it's continued growth for us as a business. That the Rothschild & Co investment of the last couple of years has really allowed us to grow and continue to expand. Most notably, we merged with Atlantic Equities a couple of years ago. And that's effectively doubled our US footprint. So we are now a much more balanced business between Europe and the US. And I think continuing to grow that and kind of be more global in our thinking is absolutely essential. And I think in terms of technology, one of the things we're doing is we're launching a new product that we call Simple. So that is SI Market Making and Principal Liquidity Engine.
Someone's beautifully put that together. Is that your baby?
I didn't come up with the name, unfortunately. And effectively, it's giving our clients access to principal liquidity, as the name suggests.
Yeah.
And that's something which the investment banks have traditionally done. But when you approach it from an investment bank angle, you've got your own central risk book, you've got your own liquidity. You will always prioritise that first.
Yeah.
So that means there are all these market makers, there are all these single dealer pools in the US, all these SIs who are looking to quote and looking to give sort of good liquidity that actually it's very difficult for our clients, for the buy side, to get to, because they don't want to connect to 5 different pools. If they go to an investment bank, they might say they're connecting, but they'll always favour their own pool. So the market maker at the end gets the exhaust.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really the culmination of everything we've talked about, that we are only able to build that because we've built out the right architecture. We are working with several different vendors in order to be able to achieve that. And it's through talking to those vendors, having the right relationships, helping them innovate. We have put ideas into the way they approach things, which we don't think they would have done previously.
Yeah.
So we've got the vendors which are helping us to plumb everything together to get all this access. So despite not having built a single gateway, we believe we can get to more of these venues than most of our peers. But it's also, we've got that human element, that it is understanding what those market makers are looking for, having those agreements of, we are not going to give you the exhaust that you would get if you're being approached by an SI or by an investment bank. Therefore, are you willing to quote in higher size at a better price? And all of the liquidity pools that we access, we have had that conversation, and they've all said, of course we would much rather see that kind of quality buy-side flow. We know you're agency only, so we know you're not kind of looking at it, you're not taking any information out of that. We know that if you say, you're giving us the whole order, that is true. Whereas when you take it through somebody who's running their own liquidity, you will often only be getting the bit that they don't want. So it is naturally lower quality and just less interesting to them.
Yeah.
So it's something that is going down extremely well with clients, that we're seeing a lot of positive feedback for, and it's something which is only achievable because we've got the right architecture and we've got the right people and we've got that kind of agency status sitting in the middle.
Yeah, and the right partnerships all the way through it.
Exactly.
So exciting times, another big year for you.
Yeah.
So you're going to go home and rest. I know you've got a young family at the moment, so there's not going to be too much rest over Christmas.
So no rest for me.
But coming in charged up for 2025.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for coming in the show.
Great to see you.
Really good to have it. I love what you guys are doing. Keep up the great work, and thanks for sharing it all with us today.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to get in touch and find out a little bit more, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, Will Winzor-Saile. There's only one with that name, so you'll probably find me.
As the old song goes. Well, brilliant to have you on. Thanks ever so much. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.